Good morning. This is Pat O'Connell calling to order the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission's regular open weekly meeting for Thursday, February 9th. We'll start with a roll call from Judy.
Yes. Commissioner Ellison,
Present.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Present.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Present.
We have 3 commissioners and we have a quorum.
Thank you. And all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the
So next item on the agenda is a consideration and approval of the agenda that we've published. I have one change to that. We'd like to defer the Employee of the Month action item to next week. Commissioners, do you have any other changes to the agenda?
No changes. Me either. I will second that motion.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Yes.
Commissioner Ellison.
Yes.
The agenda is approved as amended 3-0.
Our next agenda item is public comment. Hans, if you're out there in.
Yeah, Hans, do
Hi.
we have any public comment?
Nobody has signed up for public comment through Zoom. If nobody showed up for in person for the hearing room, there is no public comment this week.
Thank you. Yeah, our attendance is a little limited in person because it's a beautiful snowy day out there. Okay, so next item on the agenda is consideration and approval of prior meeting minutes. We're still on the minutes from 2 weeks ago, so that's January 18th open meeting. There is a version of the minutes that's been redlined, but I looked at that redlined version and it looks correct to me. So commissioners, do you have any comments on the minutes?
I do not have any comments on the minutes. I think the revised version looks correct to me as well. No comment.
Okay, seeing no disagreement, we'll approve the meeting minutes for January 18th, 2023.
As revised.
As revised, yeah, there's a red line version that Hans is working on, and the expectation is that's what he'll resolve those red lines and publish that version.
Is there a motion?
I move to approve the revised minutes from the January 18 open meeting.
Second,
I second.
Commissioner Ellison,
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
The minutes as revised from January 18th are approved 3-0.
The next agenda item, which I'll handle, is a recitation in accordance with NMSA section 10-15-J regarding closed meeting that was held on February 2nd. So the recitation there is that on February 2nd, the commission met in executive session, which was closed pursuant to section 10-15-1H7, attorney-client privilege discussion of pending litigation to which the NMPRC is a party. The only matters discussed in that executive session were the following cases: New Mexico Supreme Court case number S-1-SC-39152. That is the Avangrid versus NMPRC The next case discussed was New Mexico Supreme Court case number S-1-SC-39440. That's titled Public Service Company New Mexico versus NMPRC, related to NMPRC case number 19-00018 UT. And finally, the New Mexico Supreme Court case number S-1-SC-39401, titled Public Service Company of New Mexico et al. Versus NMPRC, and consolidated case number S-1-SC-39406, Coalition for Clean Affordable Energy et al. Versus NMPRC. That Supreme Court case is related to NMPRC case number 20-00212 UT. Then I'll further note in this recitation that I was not present for the discussion of the Supreme Court case related to NMPRC case number 20-00222-UT, as I've recused myself from that case. Okay, so I think that concludes the item 6 of the agenda. Next, we have consent action. There's a few cases on that. 2 transportation matters. Sorry, 3, yeah, 2 transportation matters.
We were wondering if you would like me to read off the consent agenda item titles before you approve the consent agenda. That's a procedure that we did with the former commission for the public.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
You do that.
Well, then, I will, hold on. Go back here. Okay, case number 23-00011 TRM in the matter of the application of Bernalillo County Fire and Rescue, DBA Bernalillo County Fire Department, for reissuance of certificate number 57677 to provide ambulance service. Next case, 23-00012 TRM in the matter of the application of Presbyterian Healthcare Services, DBA Presbyterian Espanola Hospital Emergency Medical Services, for reissuance of certificate number 16718 to provide ambulance service. Utility matter 23-0005 UT in the matter of Southwestern Public Service Company's application for authority to 1, issue up to 2 million of first mortgage bonds during 2023. 200, yes, 200 million. Those zeros are important. Of first mortgage bonds during 2023. 2, recover certain refunding costs, and 3, enter into agreements in support of interest rate hedging, including interest rate locks and swaps. Next is case number 22-00296 UT in the matter of the application of New Mexico Gas Company, Inc. for a variance from 17.10.640 NMAC for its December 2022 gas cost factor statement, and case number 23-00024 in the matter of the application of New Mexico Gas Company, Inc. for a variance from 17.10.640 NMAC for its February 2023 gas cost factor statement. And I believe that's all the consent agenda items. Is there a motion?
I guess first, any discussion of those items?
I don't have any discussion of those items.
I don't have any discussion of those items, and I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Judy, sorry to interrupt. I'm getting a message that there might be one more item on consent that was overlooked. Can we scroll?
Oh, thank you. Yes, there is one more item. It's case number 23-00028 ET. In the matter of the formal complaint of Mark Snow against Public Service Company of New Mexico. And with that, if there are no questions, we can add that to the motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to add that additional item that you just explained.
I'll second that second motion. So do we have to vote on two motions there?
We'll start over again. Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
The consent agenda items passed 3-0.
Thank you. So then the first regular action item is a discussion to be facilitated by Judith and Ed. They're going to talk about the processes that were followed over the last few months, talking about resource adequacy, looking ahead to the summer months, and then discussion if there's anything to follow up with or what would be a good plan to make sure we're aware of how the utilities are managing that going into the next summer season.
Thanks.
So I'm going to turn it over to Ed Rilkoff, our Utility Division Director.
Good morning,
Good morning, Ed.
commissioners. I'm just waiting for Patrick is going to start a slideshow. I've provided you with the slides in front of you. Okay, there it is. Okay. Thank you, Patrick. We're ready for the next one. This is just a quick presentation on resource adequacy for the summer of 2023. Thought I'd provide you with some background of what we've been looking at and give you an overview of where we are today. This, the contents are just the big events that occurred here in New Mexico, and then what's happened with the unexpected global events. Touch on resource adequacy, our bi-weekly meetings, and show you a couple graphs that summarize where PNM and EPE are as far as their resource adequacy is, and summarize with a couple of suggestions. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, just on the background, seems like a lot of things start with the ETA in 2019. And certainly we went into an environment where we had new renewable energy standards. And what happened there was that we looked at replacing the San Juan coal project with renewable energy resources, primarily solar and battery storage, and that was 497 megawatts. And coincidentally, on a timing quirk, Palo Verde, we had a contract expirations of 114 megawatts. Next slide, please. Okay, and just I thought I'd put a picture to the gravity of the amount of megawatts that we're looking at replacing with the ETA, which was a doable but aggressive schedule. Next slide, please. Well, between executing those plans for the renewable energy resources, we came up with where we were faced with these unexpected global events, and started with COVID, and that ended up turning into global supply chain disruptions. The U.S. Department of Commerce created problems in terms of importing solar panels, and there were issues with China and potentially slave labor and panels going into other countries that were actually Chinese panels. So that slowed down the whole solar side. So the consequences were delays and price increases along the supply chain, not only for new projects, but for existing projects and materials. A lot of repricing of PPAs. A lot of projects simply failed because they weren't able to meet the increased economic costs. So this isn't New Mexico alone. This is utilities and commissions all over the world are dealing with these problems and trying to deal with resource adequacy. And in New Mexico, PNM is impacted the most because of those earlier slides where we saw San Juan replacement and expiration of Palo Verde contracts. Okay. Next slide, please. One of the things that the PRC did to address resource adequacy, and this was targeted towards PNM, is to have San Juan Generating Station bi-weekly meetings to see where we were on this issue, because it was such a grave concern at the time. And it was ordered on March 2nd, 2022. And it was concerned with a 2022 summer peak. Okay, so last year's peak. These meetings are held via WebEx, and there's large attendance through a wide cross section of participants. So the meetings were expected to end after last year's summer season, but they expanded in scope. We still had delays with supply disruptions and so forth, so they have continued. Next slide, please. And just to give you an idea of it, on a San Juan Replacement Resources meeting, first bullet point, we talk about the replacement strategies, or essentially resource adequacy, and PNM would provide an update on their new renewable projects. I'll show you those in a couple slides. And then they would provide the status of the replacement power purchase plan. So what's happening is we have delays in the renewable projects, and PNM's plan is to replace it with PPAs from other states and other supply providers. And PNM is systematically following their plan, and they're issuing RFPs. You don't want to go in the market and buy all your needs at one time, because that would be like an elephant going in, and prices would increase. So they've just been averaging in prices. And fortunately, more recently, prices have softened a little bit, so they're able to average in at lower prices. So it's resource adequacy includes pricing as well, and trying to lower the cost. So depending on the meeting, these meetings could be very quick. If in 2 weeks nothing may happen on a renewable project, or they could be waiting on the results of an RFP. So I think over time the meetings have gotten shorter because they're executing their plan. There was a workshop in September, and I think PNM, I can't remember the number, but they were looking at about 350 megawatts of purchased power, and today they're looking for about 150 megawatts. So they've been systematically purchasing power, and I'll show you where they're at again on the renewable projects. Now, because these meetings go so quickly sometimes, and they've always been a good forum for other topics, and people at the meeting, PNM takes all the questions, and people talk a lot about the impacts of the San Juan Generating Station. And in a recent meeting, they threw out an RFP plan that they have through 2025. So that next bullet, it's like, I think everybody agrees that they're a useful forum to discuss other topics other than this summer's resource adequacy. And there is a suggestion that maybe we move to monthly meeting instead of bi-weekly, and also to have similar meetings for EPE and SPS. And I also, next slide, please. Wanted to mention that after those meetings of PNM, they're usually held on a Tuesday. We have had internal PRC staff resource adequacy meetings. And we would essentially review the PNM biweekly meetings and the data they present. And those meetings started to diminish in terms of the time and so forth, because again, the plan is there and we've been moving through. So it hasn't had the same focus as, a year ago or 2 years ago. So one thing that we'd like to recommend, and I'll note this at the end, but looking at replacing these meetings with a report from PNM. So I'll add to that in a minute. Next slide, please. This chart shows for PNM, basically their resources. The resources are stacked up by type, and the red line shows their peak requirements in 2023. So you can see that there is 2081 is the number there. That is the peak. It's the red dotted line. And the resource stack is the blue portion that's a little bit higher than that. So that they're above their peak requirements right now. And the top line is the projection with an 18% reserve margin. So what PNM is doing right now is they're increasing that gap between that blue block in the chart and moving up to the top reserve margin dotted line, the 2456. And if you added 150 megawatts to that would get them quite a long distance up to the top line. But again, they're adding 150 megawatts and they don't feel they have to buy more at this point. We're looking at, they have an RFP out for 150 megawatts and it's due next week on Valentine's Day. And after that RFP, they still have several months to purchase additional supplies if anything changes from their current plans. But I mentioned, next slide, please. The San Juan replacement resources. Well, this is the chart that shows those replacement resources. There's 4 projects. One has actually has been terminated by PNM, the Rockmont project, but this is the expected commercial operation dates. So these dates from when they were originally approved in different dockets, it was, starting like in June 1st, 2022, they've been delayed and you can see that they're starting to come on now and online in 2023. And you'll see that the Arroyo project, we're looking at 150 megawatts of battery storage in April. And again, these delays have resulted in the purchase power agreements that PNM has been going out in the market for. And the target has been from the start in terms of replacing San Juan generating resources. We're looking at 950 megawatts of solar plus battery storage. So the things are working, they're just being pushed out due to all those global delays that we discussed earlier. Okay, next slide, please. Now we're looking at EPE resources, and essentially we're looking at their resource plus reserves meeting their demand. You can see that within this chart, the red dotted line is their projected requirements. So they're there in terms of their reserves, but in this chart, there's 40 megawatts that they are required to purchase to get to that 504 megawatts. So they're just looking at the 40 megawatts. Next slide, please. So to summarize, the IOUs have adequate resource plans for summer 2023. That's based on, you know, I put a question mark. It's based on current projections and where, you know, where the expectations are for the project and forecasted load. PNM has this RFP I mentioned, and it's got flexibility, and they're using that flexibility to purchase in the market when costs could be lower and when they need to cover it in case there were any changes to the plan. But they feel comfortable, and they feel they're in better shape than last year for meeting last year's summer load. I mentioned EP is only looking at 40 megawatts of additional purchases for the summer. And SPS is in good shape. It wasn't even included in the bench request after the September workshop. Next slide, please. And one thing we wanted to bring to your attention as well is that PNM has these resource adequacy filings, and they're tied to different cases, and some of those cases are closed, but compliance filings are still being made under those dockets. And PNM says this is a burden, and they have to assemble all this information into different dockets, and much of it is redundant. And it also makes it difficult and sometimes confusing for staff, because they have to, there's gaps in data that they're trying to collect, and they have to look at all these various sources to find it. And it's, you know, if we're confused, I'm sure that a lot of interested parties may be confused as well. So PNM would welcome consolidating these compliance filings into one docket. And staff agrees, and they'd recommend providing an executive summary in the one docket every time they made a filing, and provide the specific tables and charts that we like to see, like the two charts I showed earlier. So it's very easy and clear to see where their resources are and how close they are to meeting their demands and the reserve. And also suggest doing this for EP and SPS. And I'd suggest this would remove the need for the internal staff, the bi-weekly meetings that we were having, because we would simply, instead of trying to look at their data and put it all together and discuss it, we would simply be able to look at this executive summary, read it, and look at all the data in the format that we want to see it. So there's that. Thank you. That concludes this presentation. If you have any questions.
Yeah, I have some questions, but go ahead. Commissioner Ellison, if you want to break this.
Sure. I guess one question I had here is, you know, it's not broken out in your chart. To what extent is PNM relying on that Arroyo battery project for the resource adequacy this summer?
Okay, that would, I'm sorry I didn't have the numbers on the charts, but it would be the San Juan replacement resources chart. And we're looking at this chart right here.
Okay.
And if you,
So those numbers are essentially included in the bar chart that you've
yes,
provided. Okay. So obviously, if that battery project were to be delayed, then there would be roughly 150 megawatt shortfall in that.
that's correct.
For meeting that resources for meeting that peak. I guess another question, it looks like to me that, you know, this for the renewable capacity, that some effective load carrying capacity has been calculated for the renewable assets, and, you know, they are being valued in this, you know, towards resource adequacy based on the effective load carrying capacity. And I would also guess that maybe the gas units have been derated by the forced outage rate. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, the scheduled and forced outage rates.
I guess, what I'm thinking is that, this seems like, a good broad brush picture, but it seems like it would be, I guess, more informative maybe to take the peak load and then, look at a particular hour or hours in the day, because then you would have a much better feel for, how much solar at least is on the system. And if, instead of derating the gas units by the forced outage rate, if you instead said, well, let's assume the biggest one is offline, sort of a single, largest contingency type, I just wonder if that would change the picture. Obviously, if we were talking about, say, January at 6 o'clock for a peak, then, we know the solar contribution would be 0. If we're talking about 6 o'clock in the evening in August, we know that there's going to be a significant solar contribution. So I guess what I'm saying is this effective load carrying capacity type of analysis sort of doesn't capture the nuances if you were to look at a specific hour in the year.
Okay. I agree. I think that could be a good modification to, adding the executive summary and the tables and things that we want. But one thing I'd also like to note is last year we had one of the, I think it was San Juan Generating Station Unit 4 was operating, and that was, I think, about 265 megawatts. So that loss of load from your largest unit doesn't occur this summer, and that's another reason PNM is feeling more comfortable, because they have smaller units that basically reduce that risk over time. So
Okay, thank you.
While we're on this same slide, the one before that chart, this one. Okay. I'll read the title since we don't have the page numbers. It's 2023 PNM resources versus projected system needs.
yes,
I don't know if Patrick can put that slide up again. It's 2023 PNM resources versus projected system needs.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
And I'll just start asking my question with respect to the 18% reserve margin that you referenced. How is that calculated, and where does that requirement come from?
I'm not sure where the 18%. I think in the past the utilities were required to have a 13% margin. I've seen different reserve margins out there, and that may just be sort of a benchmark that would be a fairly aggressive reserve margin. But as Commissioner Ellison said, this resource stack includes scheduled and forced outages in it, so they've been derated accordingly. So what we're really looking at is, that resource stack in relation, 18% above that derated stack is the calculation here.
Okay, but I was just trying to figure out where the 18% came from. So, but we're
let me follow up on that 18%. But I think
I
think that the number has been lower in terms of what the PRC has provided in the past. I think they, for some projects, for some filings, they were looking at actually 13%. So that's just a high benchmark. But if it's any different than that, I'll check on that, you know.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I would be interested to learn, I guess, I mean, I'm sure there is a like a minimum reserve margin. So I would be interested to learn what that would be. And then just one clarification on this same graphic right here. What exactly does purchases mean? So that would be the top bar.
Yeah, those are the purchases that PNM is going into the market for because the renewable projects have been delayed.
Okay.
So those are firm purchases. Sometimes, well, there could be a small component, might be unit contingent, but that's what they're issuing the RFPs for.
Okay, so
this.
Got it. So this isn't capacity that is secured. It's what PNM is looking for.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
I may make a quick comment of we'd obviously have to ask PNM, but my guess as to how that 18% reserve margin was derived, I think they're looking at some loss of load probability of, maybe it's 2 days in 10 years. And they found through modeling that 18% reserve margin would allow them to achieve that loss of load probability. But again, I think we should ask them.
And I know Nick Phillips would be the person to ask that question.
So I'm sorry, I have a question from way back on slide 3. And maybe it's how I heard it, but we got the 3 bullets under, I guess it's slide, yeah, those 3 bullets. Just wanted to make sure 2 of them are events that were encompassed in the ETA, but is there any link between PNM choosing not to renew the Palo Verde leases and the Energy Transition Act?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, I didn't either, but I just wanted to make sure that was a decision PNM made independent of.
Yeah, I believe the contracts were expiring, so that was so there was a case around that in terms of Palo Verde replacement resources.
And then on the El Paso analysis. Yeah, so that's showing a 500 megawatt system, but El Paso as a utility is closer in size to PNM. So is this only New Mexico allocated resources?
Yes.
So how does El Paso dispatch their system as a total system across New Mexico and Texas?
I'm pretty sure they dispatch their system as one system, and then this is sort of a creation to give us an idea of what would be allocated to New Mexico.
So how much are these purchases actually El Paso resources, or?
This is in here, these are purchases by El Paso.
Yeah, I guess I'm asking, are they purchases by El Paso from El Paso? Texas to New Mexico.
I would have to check that. I assume that wouldn't be, but I don't. I never thought of it. I'd have to check.
Okay. Yeah, it's mostly, these are cost allocation questions, right? I just want to make sure it's not just that we have the lights on this summer, it's that customers are paying a reasonable amount for that to happen. And then the bigger picture question is, are there purchases between PNM and El Paso that help with this summer picture? So is there any potential for double counting on these?
That's another question I'd have to look at.
Okay. And then finally, I hear you on consolidation. I think that's a point you made last week, Commissioner Ellison, that best decisions get made with best decisions. So information. So let's try to avoid compounding and conflicting reports. So anyway, I'm excited to hear this and to the point where I want it to happen tomorrow, but I know that's not probably reasonable. So what is the vehicle for getting this consolidation done? Is it a request from P&M to consolidate the filing? Is that a staff initiated thing? Or, I mean, how do we get from where we're at today to where this is happening in a way that interested parties beyond the commission and the utilities can be involved to make sure the information people need is being provided?
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a question for legal that we follow up on.
I would like to second that in terms of, if we're able to consolidate some of the reporting and that makes everyone's life easier, then that's, from my perspective, that's something that we should pursue. And my opinion also is if you feel that going to monthly meetings would make more sense, I would support that personally. I guess I do have a question of whether it might make sense to do a short reliability workshop and invite the three utilities to make a brief presentation, which would allow us to ask questions in terms of, to drill into some of these details. It looks like things are going in the right direction, but certainly there's reason to be concerned and wanting to monitor developments given the large movements that we're having with the San Juan resources dropping out and the Palo Verde lease expiration. I would think it would be a reasonable thing to do to ask each utility to make, maybe a 20-minute presentation and give us a few minutes for some question and answering. I just wanted to know what your thoughts were about that.
Having been on the other side of that, I'm all for it. So.
I think it's a great idea as well. I would just ask to maybe be able to see the presentation a few days before so that I could gather my questions.
Of course, I was thinking about perhaps at our next open meeting, placing an item on the agenda that we would vote on for, asking for this workshop to take place. And then, of course, the utilities would have some advance notice and would maybe have a couple of weeks to prepare materials for that.
Absolutely. That sounds like a good idea to me as well.
Yeah, I just want to say something I think that we're all assuming, but say it out loud, is that I think SPS should be included in that too. I mean, my mom's from Missouri, so show me.
I think they should be. I think they should be given the opportunity to speak about their system and about the resource adequacy planning that they're doing.
Commissioner Aguilar, to your point about we could have the utilities submit their presentation in written format the week before, and then you'd be able to read it and think about questions. Would that work for you?
Yeah, that would work for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Ed, I just want to clarify the process that you're proposing, because it's not entirely clear to me whether staff would still have monthly meetings. I understand that it would be moving from every 2 weeks to monthly, but is the report instead of the monthly meeting?
Instead of the staff monthly meeting.
Yes. Okay. So the meetings would go away and it would be replaced with a report.
Yes. And just to be clear, the San Juan replacement meetings would be monthly, but the staff resource adequacy meetings would go away. And we would look at the report, and if we needed to, if we saw something that needed further study, then we would bring it in front of the commission.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that sounds fine to me as well. I have a question as to, or something for you all to consider is how often should the report be filed? Or maybe it's not like monthly or quarterly, but based on when we would want to consider the information. For example, like a preliminary report in the fall for the next summer, and then an update, sometime in the spring, just to get a status update. Just some things to consider there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Rilkop, for that presentation. I think it's very informative, and that sounds like a great start for more and better things. And then he deferred a question to you, legal. So if you could help us with what's the best vehicle to make this a reality.
Well, I would say the workshop could be scheduled in the dockets that were listed on the open meeting agenda 21-00159-160. That's a general inquiry docket into resource adequacy. We could actually expand the docket title to include system reliability. It's been it's changed its title several times. That being said, regarding the monthly, changing the meetings to monthly, we would need to bring back an order for next week in case number 20-00182, 19-00195. It's a consolidated case. It's the San Juan generating station resource replacement case. In that case, there was as Ed indicated, there was the March 2nd, 2022 order to have the biweekly meetings. Also in that docket, there was an order for monthly compliance filings, which were responding to a series of questions. Perhaps we could change that order to just require a monthly report and change the information that we want to get in that monthly report. So basically it would be there's two dockets going on, the replacement resource docket for PNM, and then the more broader resource adequacy reliability for all three of the IOUs in the inquiry docket that's listed on the agenda. So I think that could work. I'm not 100% clear on what exactly the monthly reports in the PNM 2182 docket would be. I would need help from utility division to know exactly the right type of information we're going to be requesting in those monthly reports.
And just to test that I understand what you told me, it sounds like this should happen in the resource adequacy docket, because that's the docket that includes all of the utilities.
Yes,
And
that's correct.
one element of it would be closing out a piece of the PNM specific docket and moving the ongoing piece into or just.
Oh, actually,
continuing.
we've had the ongoing piece in the PNM docket.
That's where I'm
yeah.
confused. This is resource adequacy for all three utilities.
Right.
Just doing, it feels like since the other two utilities are included, doing something in the PNM cases sounds messy to me.
Right, and it has been messy. But PNM has had unique replacement resources issues that were unique to them due to the San Juan units coming offline. So we had the dual tracks going,
Okay, so,
asking we had a specific monthly compliance filing that just P&M did regarding replacement resources, and that was in docket 2182. And then we had the broader resource adequacy docket for all three IOUs. And in that docket, we did the workshop. So there was a certain amount of duplicity with regard to P&M. But and so, yeah.
so I guess my request is when you're building what we're gonna look at next week, just consider that and efficiency and clarity of information is really the premium.
Because we haven't had any kind of monthly reporting in the dockets with the three IOUs. We've only required the monthly compliance reporting for P&M in the 2182 docket. So I'm not sure if the commission wants to change that. If the commission did want to change that, you could stop the compliance reporting in the San Juan replacement resource case and do monthly reporting for everyone in the other case.
Yeah, I think we
Yeah.
can have that discussion offline. I think, and fellow commissioners, amend this if I'm not summarizing it correctly, but sounds like next step would be a broader look at summer resource adequacy for all three utilities. Format of weekly versus monthly isn't as important to me as let's set a baseline soon for what everybody's looking at, what their challenges are, what status they think they're in. And then if we want ongoing reporting, that would be not something to decide now, but something that we can figure out after we've taken this first step. Because I don't think monthly, that's just personally, I don't think monthly is the important thing. It's having benchmarks and checking in when we hit those benchmarks. So like one unavoidable benchmark is it's going to get hot this summer. So start with that and then move forward and figure out what we need from that point. And then I would be surprised if that's an ongoing weekly, monthly type thing. That's all right.
I would certainly agree with that, that the more important aspect of this is to have a look at the metrics that we're examining and looking at whether they're meeting the appropriate reliability criteria. That seems key.
Again, thank you, Mr. Relkoff, and thank you, Ms. Amer. If no further discussion, we'll move on to Ms. Amer's next item. It sounds like we just
Yes.
added to the list, right?
Yeah. Well,
Updates on pending commission ruling.
yes, and with that, I'd like to direct you to the graph that we did provide you regarding rulemakings. And it was placed in board effect, and I can just read it to you, or I
Is there
could
any ability for Becca to put it on the screen?
that's Patrick, do you have the capability of going into board effect, or do I need to email you a summary of our pending rulemakings?
I can go into board effect, Judy.
Okay, thank you, Hans. It's the most, yeah, it says February 8th version. And if you can put it on the screen.
Okay, it's coming up shortly here.
Just to, as a brief introduction, I was going to request that each one of the OGC lawyers that were responsible for the particular rulemaking be responsible for any questions that you might have regarding that particular rulemaking. And so if we start at the upper left, Russell Fisk had the rulemaking in case number 20-00170 UT, institutional operator calling services rule 17.11.28 NMAC. And Russell, are you available for any questions on this one?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you, Russell. Just to clarify, one of the things I was hoping to get out of this presentation is just see how things are stacked up over the next few months. We know that there are ongoing rulemakings. Some things are scheduled, some things are needed to be scheduled. There are some we haven't even formally initiated yet, but we discussed at the last meeting. So I was just trying to get a sense for how those processes were stacking up on top of each other. So it sounds like the presentation we have here is just, let's talk about each one independently. What I think would be more helpful is if we could see how they're interacting with each other more from a workflow point of view, because I want us to do a good job on these rulemakings, like the one last week about tolling provisions in procedural orders. I think that's pretty important. And so I want to make sure that not just other parties, but staff has opportunity to do a good job of that one. So I just was looking for pinch points where things were stacked up on top of each other.
Well, if you look on the effective dates, we're completing several of these, and so the pinch point actually was right now, where we were trying to get there 3 rules to the state records and archives for publication on February 14th. Because we had the interconnection rule, which is at the bottom of the chart, 21-00266, and we had the transportation electrification rule, which was 22-00085, as well as the Renewable Energy Act rule amendments, which we had heard on January 15th as a motion for a hearing. Those 3 could have been published, submitted all on February 14th, but we decided to hold back on the 20-00158 and submit it next cycle in order to not have such of a log jam. That being said, we'll have 2 of those rules, then the ones we did submit on February 14th, they'll be submitted, they'll be published in the register on February 28th, and then we will be able to oh no, I'm getting this wrong. We'll be able to have them effective published on February 14th. And then we will be able to have the 2158 rule effective on February 28th. So 3 of those then will be basically done and taken off this chart. So then the only 2 open ones that we would still have pending, which is the 21-00258, the state rural universal service fund rule. And Russell, according to the chart, says he anticipates having a final order to the commission in the first quarter of this year. And then Russell, the status of the institutional operator calling services rule, you still need to publish it in the New Mexico Register, is that correct?
That's correct. And that's a step that doesn't require any commission action. It just needs to be submitted for publication.
So those two telecom rules will still need to be worked on in this first quarter. So it looks like we adopted a lot of rules at the end of last quarter, and they are not on the chart here. So in terms of rulemakings, we do have capacity to start new ones. If that seems to be where your question is.
Yeah, that was my primary concern, is launching into a bunch of new rulemakings while we were still dealing with ongoing existing rulemaking. So that's helpful. And then the other question is, rulemakings aren't the only thing we're doing. So want to make sure we're cognizant of
Right.
case activity too. I mean, but we have to be able to multitask. Just don't want to make it impossible.
And to that point, we had previously, for the previous commission, prepared a Gantt chart of all the work that we had and the deadlines. One of the commissioner's assistants helped us with that. And we could do something of that nature because it was more comprehensive. It showed all the pending work. I don't know if anyone in OGC has the capacity to do it. We probably could learn. We also had another format that we prepared for the other commission, which was just more a summary of what's coming in the first quarter, everything, what's coming in the second quarter, what's coming in the third quarter. So, and then under that, it would be more like appeals, rate cases and rulemakings. So there's different ways of organizing the material.
Yeah, what you just described sounds like exactly what I was after. So
Okay, because we already have that. And we updated that as of December, so we can update that for you.
personally, I would appreciate that. I don't know if you want to add anything to that. But she said Gantt chart, and my engineer heart sang.
I had never heard of a Gantt chart before it was created, so.
I would appreciate that information as well.
It probably will take, I don't think we could have it ready for next Wednesday, but maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And then that'll help me anyway, understand better. And,
Right,
and
it's more of a timeline of everything as opposed to just rulemakings or appeals or cases.
yeah, it's easier to set priorities if you know what you need to get ahead of. Well, I appreciate the presentation. Any further discussion on that? So our next item is the updated list of legislation that the commission has looked at so far. Last week we looked at or had a discussion about the it doesn't look like it's on this list this time, but the Senate bill that would fund purchasing a building that maybe we could use. And then my understanding is you attended a committee hearing last week. Is that correct?
I attended the committee meeting and had planned to speak in support, but they were running over time on everything, and so they didn't hear any comments in support or opposition, but the Senate Bill 144 was approved by the committee.
Yeah, thank you. And it is on the list. I just didn't see it, but so this list is published for two reasons, I think. One is to inform what bills the PRC has looked at, and then it's opportunities, a springboard for three of us to discuss whether the commission wants to take a more active role or a formal position on any of these bills. I personally don't have any that I would nominate for that status. Just wanted to open the floor if somebody did have anything you wanted to do.
I don't have anything to bring up other than the PRC building bill that's already been discussed.
I don't have anything additional to discuss either.
Thank you. And I believe that the deadline for introducing new legislation is upon us. So I think most of the activity will be as bills get amended, if there are updates to what we've done. So anyway, I appreciate the team working on that. And I've been reading the FIRs as they come out, and again, appreciate that information. Thank you. Next item is communications with commissioners. Other than the fact that we're all heading to the NARUC meeting next week, I didn't have much to talk about there. So did you, either of you have any announcements or conversations you want to have?
I guess I had a few items. Previously, I had mentioned that our website, the page dealing with the renewable energy data, I felt was out of date and even misleading. And I had, after that, spoken with Ms. Amer and Mr. Rilkoff, and so some of that old information has been taken off, and we have a work in progress notification up on that section of our website. So I think, figuring out the best content to put there is harder than taking down the content that's wrong. And so so figuring out what to replace it with is still a work in progress that folks are thinking about now. But I just wanted to let you know that step had been taken on our website. And I think this loops into the conversation about renewable energy data in general. The most recent data that we could put up on our website would be the 2021 RPS data from the three utilities, because we simply don't have any more current data. We're getting these annual reports with about a 6-month lag. So it'll be summertime until we have data for 2022 that we could put up on the website. And I think we can do better than that. I think it's worth getting some input from others. I've asked Arthur O'Donnell to look into what some other states are doing in this regard, and at some point I may want to ask that we do a notice of proposed rulemaking and get some broader input in terms of what frequency should we be collecting this data, and in what form do we want to collect this data? And I've also spoken to Mr. Rilkoff about distribution reliability metrics and minimum service standards, and he's asked a staff member to also look into what some other states are doing in this regard, so that we can have that as input. Another item is, during our confirmation hearings yesterday and otherwise, this idea of consumer advocacy, and that our state does not have a division of the consumer advocate or office of the consumer advocate. I guess we haven't been through a rate case together, but I think the Office of General Counsel input and sort of just thinking about prior rate cases and settlements show that large consumers are parties, and environmental groups are frequently parties, but the residential consumer doesn't really have a seat at the table. I don't think that the Attorney General's office, is solely focused on representing the retail rate payer. And so I guess in terms, of thinking about legislation, at least to me, I think that's something that's needed. And I felt that there could be some bipartisan support for, creating an office of consumer advocate. And I know our legal division is overworked as it is, and we are yet to spin up with additional staff members. But I think it would make sense to ask our legal division to investigate, what some other states are doing in this regard, and what could we propose. It may be a little late in this legislative session to kind of propose new legislation, but it seems to me to be a worthwhile area for us to investigate and to see if we might want to make a formal recommendation as a commission.
Thank you for raising this. I fully support this. I agree with you. I think that the ratepayer consumer voice is missing. I mean, I think we do consider their interest as part of the public interest, but the public interest also includes other factors. And I think it would be very beneficial to have a consumer advocate perspective focused on that perspective, be able to submit comments into the record. And so I agree with you, and I would support that. The legislative session is coming to a close very soon, and I think Monday is the last day to propose legislation, but I don't think that it would necessarily be too, I don't think it would be too difficult to introduce it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I think it would be worthwhile at least attempting. And, if if the legislators are not receptive or have concerns, then, we could maybe try for the next session. but I think it's worth discussing, especially as, this is something that came up yesterday during our confirmation hearings, but I'd like to see what Chair O'Connell has to say.
Yeah, no, I agree that it's the takeaway from the discussion that I have right now is that we agree that a sharper focus on consumer advocacy is important and valuable. Sounds like figuring out how to, again, launch that craft is a good next step. And frankly, that's one of the things I'm interested in learning or beginning as we go to NARUC next week is other models that are out there, just to get some ideas. Not that any one state does it the way it'll work here in New Mexico, but I think we can get some good patterns or see what's important there.
It would be, if that, how other states handled the issue would be something we could research. In terms of getting legislation within the 7 days, yeah, that could be a problem, especially because we would need to decide which way we would want to go. You'd need to know, well, 3 states do it this way, 10 states do it this other way. Which way do we think would work the best for New Mexico? That being said, we don't want to just duplicate what we have now. A standalone office would be ideal. As to whether or not the legislature would create, fund it, et cetera, that's another issue.
And then one other idea I had on that was, I think there might be some things we could do procedurally without legislation that might help with that. I've observed over the years, for the big cases, there will be big public comment sessions, but they tend to be kind of after the ship has sailed. The record has been developed or is well into being developed, and we have to make our decision based on the record. So things like moving public comment session up in front of when parties have to file testimony, and then potentially we could use what we hear in public comment to create bench requests that hopefully parties would address some of the consumer interests that come up through public comment, while there's still a chance for them to be vetted or examined within the record that gets developed as a case gets developed. So I think there's lots of good ideas out there. And I would agree that the thing we should strive for is and maybe it's an office, but have a dedicated full-time focus to that would be good. But I think there are things we could do today that help build us to where we need to go.
Okay, and I just want to talk about the scope of this group as well, because I'm sort of imagining something that would be able to focus also on like tribal interests. So I don't know if that's, like a subgroup within this, like a new division or something like that, but I just wanted to mention that that's also what I have in mind as I'm saying this.
I think the floor is still yours, Commissioner Ellison.
I don't have too much more. Mr. Rilkoff has circulated this table with some commissioner memberships, and I think maybe if we want to discuss that now, that's fine, but maybe we should hold off for final decisions on it until after this NARUC meeting. We might learn of some more potential demands for our membership. I would just say, I guess following up on the tribal advisory council. We've discussed this before. I think it could be advantageous for us to appoint, one of us to be a point person, yet for any of us to feel that we could reach out to that council at any time and that they felt the same way, just someone more to organize regular meetings and sort of to be responsible for that contact was sort of what I was thinking about.
Yeah, I would agree with you that that's one of the things I'm planning to learn next week is what committees are available through NARUC, and perhaps the three of us can find a way to make sure New Mexico is well represented by the three of us getting on different committees, and then that might help inform these other items. And then just to structure the discussion we're going to have, what I've done is sent Mr. Rilkoff my priority list in terms of 1, 2, 3. Not that I would be disappointed if I only got my third choice, but just that might help clarify when we get to that point of dividing responsibilities there.
And it strikes me that some of these committees will, are really key, such as this regional power cooperation committee that would, I would think, be talking about a potential regional transmission organization formation for the West. And it would be and for the other committees too, it seems like it would be a good thing if, whoever is on those committees could communicate back what they learned. I don't know if we can do, memorandums or what the best, or if that needs to happen at a, this commissioner discussion in an open meeting. But it seems to me that we should have some way of communicating back what we've learned from these meetings.
Yeah, I agree. That's important that you stay informed. The other thing I'm seeing when looking through that list is the committee assignments are really each of us taking on a time commitment responsibility to do the work of the committee. Frequently, then the work of the committee is going to be produced or discussed in a bigger forum. So, for example, one of the things I'm interested in is the commissioner appointment to CREPC. That will have a conference, and all of us can attend that conference and benefit from hearing not just what the committee says at that conference, but what our fellow commissioners in the state. So that's the other thing. Is just because we're on the committee doesn't mean we aren't able to participate in the work that gets done by those organizations.
I guess one final thing, this is a really minor procedural point. I have the feeling that we're a little in flux in terms of deciding what might be an order that would be signed by a single commissioner versus an order that might be signed for all of us. And I think the practice has been, if it's a routine procedural order, that it could be done, in between open meetings by a single commissioner. Like if, we need, Presbyterian needs a temporary ambulance license extension or something like that. That's not really something that, any of us would want to see lapse. And, I think a case can be made that it makes sense to allow one commissioner to sign that to act, more timely. But I guess I was just wondering if we could have a brief discussion around that issue.
Yeah, I'm still learning what can be, approved with a single signature. I like the idea, when it comes to something like what you just mentioned. These would obviously have to be more routine cases that are not contested. But I like that idea. I think it offers more a quicker response when it's kind of when one commissioner can make that decision. So I guess I would want to hear from OGC, what the authorities we have to be able to do that. If we can vote on sort of a process that would allow us to be more efficient by approving an order through a single signature, I would be very much for that.
Yeah, I'll just add to that you landed on an issue that I think is also important is let's also think about this in the context of our open meeting schedule, because the more I've studied it, especially with 3-member commission, I think there's a lot of advantage if we could go to a bi-weekly schedule. So I still expect all our votes will happen in the open meetings. So that might affect the boundary of where single signatures need to be, just because the business of the commission has to continue. They can't wait for us to meet every other week.
I don't know if this is the time for me to, I can let you know the NMPRC rule is regarding single commissioner or procedural orders is 1.2.2.30 entitled procedural authority of a single commissioner. And it says in A, the chairman of the commission or any other commissioner shall preside at public hearings conducted by more than one commissioner. B, the chairman of the commission or any other commissioner may issue any, and this is the crux of it, procedural orders prior to, during, or after a public hearing, including but not limited to orders or notices designating a hearing examiner to preside. So that can be done by single signature. Scheduling public hearings. 3, clarifying issues to be considered during a proceeding. That's how commissioners have, pursuant to that section, that's how commissioners have issued bench request orders at any point during a proceeding, including during the process of a public hearing. 4, in the absence of a quorum of a commission, of commissioners, and when prompt action is necessary to avoid the effectiveness of rate increases for customers of utilities or telecommunications providers by operation of law, or suspending the operation of a rate increase request. Provided that such procedural order is consistent with law and does not involve a final determination of the proceeding. And 5, issuing orders temporarily suspending operating authorities pursuant to 18.3.2.30 NMAC, and that's for suspending operating authorities of motor carriers for health and safety reasons. C, the delegation of one commissioner of procedural order authority shall not narrow the authority of the hearing examiner pursuant to this rule or any other rule or order of the commission, unless the order by the hearing examiner is inconsistent with and superseded by the procedural order of the one commissioner, and that a party may appeal pursuant to our interlocutory appeal rule, a procedural order of a single commissioner. So there always is is that due process right? If any party feels aggrieved or that the single signature order exceeded the authority of this rule of a single commissioner to issue an order, they can appeal that. So in general, it's designating hearing examiners or immediate something that needs prompt action to avoid perhaps the cessation of operating authority or to immediately suspend the operating authority of a telecommunications, not telecommunication, of a transportation carrier. Generally, what the single signature orders that have been done in the past have been perhaps an errata order. If an order goes out and somebody notices a 2022 and it should have been 2023, something of that nature in the order. An order setting a public hearing could be done by single signature. An order extending a deadline for submission by staff of a response if they perhaps can't meet that deadline and they come the day before and say, we can't meet the deadline. Can you get would a commissioner approve a single signature order for our response or any party's response? We've also, by single signature order, we've issued notices of formal complaints and orders to answer. It's not a final determination on the case. It just provides the notice to the utility that there's been a complaint, formal complaint filed against them, and they have to answer within 20 days. I'm sure there are other things that I've forgotten. And if anyone in OGC can think of any other thing, you could chime in now. But those are the types of things that we have done with single signature orders.
No, I appreciate that very thorough presentation and good food for thought as we work on, do we need to change this moving forward? But also, it also highlights to me one of the items that we've talked about this every meeting, maybe we need to get over it, but it'd be nice to change the Open Meeting Act so we can have this conversation without it being at the expense of everybody who's attending the meeting.
Right. And
Thank
for now, we're just doing the best we can.
Yeah,
Right. You know,
absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess wanted to broach the subject and, start a conversation about that. It seems that to me that, we want to retain the flexibility to act quickly on non-controversial matters when we can. Yet, we don't want a single commissioner to, sort of make a big decision on their own when that should have gone to, the whole commission, obviously. So just wanted to start that conversation. I guess one other comment on the bi-weekly meetings, to me, that makes a lot of sense. There sort of, I see really only one drawback with it, and that is this commissioner discussion session. It's nice to have a way to have a discussion, and if we go to a bi-weekly interval, that may be a long time between our talking to each other. So just food for thought.
Yes, that is a good segue to the discussion that I wanted to have, which is that I do think we have been unduly burdened in terms of internal operational discussions that we can have. Let me rephrase that. Discussions about internal operations, such as the discussion about whether we should revise the advisor postings. We mentioned at one point that we would discussed that, but we haven't been able to because of the Open Meetings Act. So these are discussions that in the past with 5 commissioners, 2 commissioners could talk about. But now that we have 3, 2 constitute a quorum, so we can no longer talk about that. And so I did, I guess, complain, as I was meeting senators ahead of my confirmation to them, and they understood, and they are willing to help. And again, I'm thinking about internal operation things. I'm not talking about a case that would affect utilities or stakeholders. And so they are receptive and sort of asked me like what I think would help. I originally thought that maybe there was something in the Open Meetings Act, but I after thinking about it further, I don't necessarily think that is the problem. I think that there could maybe be fixes within the Public Regulation Commission Act that could be revised. And so I am hoping that we can alleviate this problem so that we are free to talk about whether we need more advisors, whether and what type of advisors they should be, and those sort of discussions. And so I think that would alleviate part of the concern that you are raising, Commissioner Ellison, and also wanted to let you know what I've been up to, since I can't tell you otherwise.
Glad to hear you're staying off the streets. I appreciate that, and yeah, just again, I don't have much this time because the week has been mostly consumed with preparing for this meeting and our confirmation process yesterday. So happy that process concluded in a positive way, and personally, it just reinforced for me the need to do a good job and re-energized me and around the idea of it. Let's get busy. So just wanted to share that.
And I would comment that certainly one path that we could take here is to get some legal advice in terms of how to interpret the Open Meetings Act, how it applies to the commission. I guess my personal opinion is that to me it would make sense that we could speak about personnel and procedural matters outside of an open meeting, but I think we probably may want to get some more clarity.
Yeah, so I think that is also part of what I was referring to. The problem might not be the Open Meetings Act. I think we're being conservative in our interpretation of the Open Meetings Act, and so maybe there are other vehicles that we can pursue also, like maybe like an opinion from the Attorney General, or
yeah, I was going to suggest that because the Open Meetings Act compliance is the jurisdiction of the Attorney General's Act. They're the ones that receive, they have like an Open Meetings Act division. They receive complaints. We've had complaints filed against the PRC. If that occurs, they forward it to us. They tell us when we have to submit responses to. The interesting thing is we file the responses timely, and we have not received any responses from them. That being said, because you're public officials, you can request what's called a formal general opinion. And I think that would be a really good idea.
Right, because we obviously have our core business, which is regulating utilities, and the Open Meetings Act is critical to making sure that there is transparency into those decisions. But I would be very surprised if utilities and stakeholders care about whether, well, I'm sure they actually do care about whether we have enough advisors. They would want us to have enough advisors, but I don't think that those discussions are necessarily, they don't really go with what the mission of the commission is. We want to make sure that we're advised properly, that and our internal procedures are adequate, and those are the things that I've been sort of struggling with lately that I would like to improve, and like to speak with the other commissioners about. And so potentially if I'm not successful in sort of talking to my discussions with these legislators, then maybe that's something that we could pursue.
Thank you. Any more discussion with the commissioners?
I don't think so.
With that, I would say we are adjourned and see you next week.